Okay, guys, so if you have not done so, go ahead and write 5 here because this is for POL 5. Put your first and last name, philosophy 1301, field 1301, the days that we meet, Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, MW or TR, and then the class that time starts, okay? And if there are any other documents for this module, make sure you've done the same. We do not put a date because we just have POL 5 for this. As you can see, the beginning of this section of chapter 3, 3.2 is surveying the case for rationalism, and this part comes after the leading questions for rationalism. So this lesson does presuppose that you completed the outline as directed in the video that went with the outline document that you were to complete prior to this. In this part of this module, we are going to get some basic facts about rationalism that you should be able to understand in virtue of us already having gone over the core concept for knowledge that we're working with, which is defined as what? Justified true belief. And in virtue of the fact that you learned about the a priori, a posteriori distinction when it comes to knowledge, i.e. how we justify the claim that a belief is true. As we're going through this, I want you to keep in mind that the rationalist believes that all knowledge ultimately is a priori justified. Okay. Now, we're not going to take a look at this part. Okay. So when it comes to this part, you're certainly welcome to read it. I just had to copy it because I didn't want to just give you like just all of a sudden this with, this part here and then this part here. So if you'd like to read that part, you can. What I want to focus on is this section right here. So draw an arrow right here in terms of where we're going to focus. So it says the 3 anchor points of rationalism. These are like really basic core presuppositions that the rationalist has when it comes to their views of knowledge. Again, knowledge being defined as justified true belief. We're not going to put a triangle over rationalism because rationalism names a theory, okay? Now it says reason is the primary or most superior source of knowledge about reality. So we are going to put a triangle over reason because reason is so important. It's at the core of rationalism. It makes sense given what? Rationalism. What does it mean to be rational? We use reason. Notice that it says it's the primary or most superior source. So what we're going to do is that concepts that are integral to the positive case for a theory, what it is, so in other words, what knowledge is and how it's possible, we're going to do filled in triangles, and I'll let you know when to do that. And then we're going to put triangles over other words, but we're not going to fill them in because those words name concepts that are of general importance to epistemology and or the debate of epistemology, and might be concepts that are relevant to a variety of theories. So I want you to think about what does it mean for something to be a primary source, okay? In fact, let's underline that like that, or to be even a superior source, okay? So there's 2 concepts named here, primary source or superior source. Of what? Of knowledge. We are not going to fill that in because that's a core concept of interest to all the theories that we're learning about right now. And we're not going to put a triangle over reality because reality names the core concept for which branch of philosophy? Metaphysics. But of course, when we're asking questions about the possibility of knowledge and if we can have it, how so, we're asking about knowledge about reality. But we're not going to put a triangle over it because we're focused on highlighting epistemological concepts. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is you need to pick one of these words, either primary or superior. So again, you're going to pick one of these words and you are going to give me a definition based on some criterion that I give you. You don't have to do it for both, just do it for one. Okay, so you're going to do some research. You're going to go into a dictionary. You can, if you want to use ChatGPT or AI, you can, but what it gives you has to come from a dictionary. So I'm going to need a dictionary citation that I will check to make sure that you actually got this from an official dictionary. So it has to be like dictionary.com, English Heritage Dictionary, Oxford English Dictionary. The Collins Dictionary is great. So here are some criteria that I'm going to give you. 1, when you give me, so this is the sign, right? You have to pick one of these signs for a concept that is named here in this gist of this anchor point. Then when it comes to the definition, and we're not doing a full concept triangle, we're just doing the definition. Your definition cannot contain any version of the word that you're defining. Again, your definition cannot contain any version of the word you're defining. That's the first rule. The second rule is that the definition that you pick has to make sense in light of where it's being used. Okay, so it has to keep the context in mind. So I shouldn't get, like, for primary and superior, I wouldn't want you to give me a legal definition or a definition that has to do with, like, power in terms of political government. It has to be one that makes sense given the overall gist of this claim right here and what is discussed here in this entire section right here. Okay, so you might want to make sure that we go through all of this first before you look for your definition. Okay, and then you'll write out your definition. And then rule number 3 is you have to give me the source. You can tell me you use ChatGPT or AI, but then you have to tell me where AI or ChatGPT got that from. Now, here's the warning. Did you know that ChatGPT and AI get things wrong? They hallucinate. So make sure that if you're using those tools, that you click on the source link. It usually gives you a link to where it's getting it from, and you go to the source and make sure that it actually is pulling from an actual dictionary, the actual definition. The other problem with AI and ChatGPT is that it'll paraphrase, and I don't want that. I want the actual definition given from an actual dictionary. So my recommendation is to just go to a dictionary. Now you could give AI or ChatGPT the prompt that I've given you. You can say, hey, my professor wants this kind of definition. Here are the rules, blah, blah, blah. But I don't want a definition that AI or ChatGPT has made up. I want one from a dictionary. So keep all that in mind. Okay, so according to the rationalist, it is through reason, we're going to put a little triangle right there, that we truly understand the fundamental truths about reality. So it says truly understand, that we get to a true understanding. That's not really being used, that word truly, it's not really being used in the way that we're using it in the definition for knowledge. So we're not going to put a triangle over that instance of truly. For example, most rationalists would say that the truths in the following list are some basic truths about the world that will never change. Here we do put, don't fill it in, I'm crossing that out. Put an unfilled triangle over truths here and over here. Truth is something that all of the theories are interested in, right? So we're going to go ahead and put a clear triangle over those words. Okay, so then it says, although our experience certainly does illustrate most of these beliefs, our experiences also consist of particular concrete events. Hence, no experiences of seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting, or touching specific objects can tell us that these statements will always be true for every future event we encounter. So if you like, you can go ahead and take a look at these different kinds of truths that cannot be known, according to the rationalist, through ultimately a posteriori, if you will. By the way, notice the word hence, okay? What is hence? Is it a premise or a conclusion indicator? It is a conclusion indicator. So there's a conclusion being drawn on behalf of the rationalist theory. In other words, there's a little argument for rationalism, but it's actually the negative case for rationalism, meaning it's arguing against another theory or another idea about what makes knowledge possible. And it's arguing against an appeal to particular experiences of particular events, which would rely on what? Sensory experiences. So by here it's saying no sensory experiences. And we realize that because it says seeing, feeling, hearing, tasting. Do you guys see how my in-class lectures and prior lessons are connecting? We talked about those things and outlined those things when we spent our first day in epistemology in the a priori, a posteriori distinction, right? So now you're better able to follow this. Also, you see the lesson on the concept of a concept coming into play and the lesson on argument. So yeah, a little argument is being given right here on behalf of the rationalist, where it's making its case for its view about the possibility of knowledge by attacking something with respect to a rival theory that is empiricism. Don't worry about that too much. But yes, some kind of conclusion is being offered against this being a legitimate, the superior or ultimate source of knowledge. And since it's using the word hence, we know that some kind of premise is being given right here. And that premise is, this is what's called a discount. Although our experience certainly does illustrate most of these beliefs, The premise actually begins here, so write a P, okay? So our experiences always consist of particular events, so no experiences, blah, 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 as it's stated. Okay, so now it says, the rationalist claims that the following statements represent a priori truths. Very important concept. We're going to fill that in because this is a concept that the rationalists advance and that they think is a coherent concept with actual examples, references, instances in reality. They are a priori, and now we're going to go ahead and fill that in as well, because they can be, let's underline known. Of course, that's a core concept, so we'll put an unfilled triangle. Apart from experience, yet they tell us what the world is like. So known apart from experience goes with our lesson on a priori justification. They are known what? Independent of any particular experiences. Again, do you see how this connects to prior lessons? Okay, so what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and read through these statements that, according to the rationalist, can be known a priori. Before you reread them, I encourage you to read the definition that we marked up, analyzed, and took note of and applied when we were looking at the a priori, a posteriori distinction in class.